Bonjour et bienvenue pour cette troisième partie de l'introduction de la méthode pour piano du QIWI du pianiste. Nous ajoutons une note au grave et une note à l'aigu. C'est d'ailleurs la même. Ce qui...
Ладно,
Là, évidemment.
Потом про это говорю. Видишь, охренеть, просто у меня телефон уже даже вообще просто. Что тут творится?
На основании указа президента и распоряжения главы Удмуртской республики образовательный процесс в организациях разного уровня будет организован следующим образом. С 30 октября по 7 ноября общеобразовательные школы, среднее профессиональное образование, высшее образование, дополнительное образование уходят на следующий режим работы. Школы на каникулы, даже если школьные каникулы начались уже где-то по графику с 25 числа. Среднее профессиональное образование и высшее образование – это режим самостоятельной работы студентов в условиях, когда педагоги не работают. По крайней мере, наши рекомендации будут вузам именно такими. Что касается дополнительного образования, то дополнительное образование не работает с 30 по 7 число. И детские сады работают в режиме дежурных групп. Что же касается дальнейшей деятельности, с 8 ноября дистанционное обучение в школах, дистанционное обучение в среднем профессиональном образовании и вузах, дистанционное образование в дополнительном образовании, дистант, и обычный режим работы в детских дошкольных образовательных организациях. Кроме того, хотела бы добавить, что школы-интернаты для детей с ОВЗ работают в обычном режиме, и Удмуртский кадетский корпус, то есть в режиме обсервации фактически они работают. Далее у нас в 10 муниципалитетах работают по плану, как это и было заложено, пришкольные лагеря. И 10 загородных лагерей тоже продолжают свою работу в осенние каникулы. В условиях строгого соблюдения всех мер только вакцинированный персонал в лагерях с ковид, с тестами, с ПЦР-тестами, с 75% загрузкой, то есть со всеми теми правилами, которые были. Но планы на осенние каникулы остаются, лагеря продолжают свою работу. Какие-то из них уже начали свою работу и просто продолжат, какие-то как раз в период с 30 по 7.
По группам детских садах, да, дежурных групп, как они будут формироваться?
Эта система будет работать без исключения во всех муниципалитетах. Мы понимаем, что многие производства даже в нерабочие дни не останавливаются, начиная с медицинских, например, работников. Всегда опрос родителей проводится заранее. У нас уже опыт 2020 года такой есть. Вот сейчас Наталья Геннадьевна, в принципе, может немножечко добавить по городу Ижевску. Опрос проводится, на основании этого открываются группы. Но мы понимаем, что у нас сейчас и разведение потоков, и группы не должны быть переполненными, поэтому групп дежурных будет достаточно много. Но мы знаем, откровенно говоря, что с учащимися начальной школы всегда достаточно сложно, особенно первоклассники, но есть такие виды занятий, все-таки заданий, которые они могут выполнять, какие-то творческие задания, какие-то проекты, и, конечно, здесь нужна будет большая помощь родителей, по-другому здесь никак. Пока не было решения, распоряжения главы, не было решения штаба, заранее, конечно, этого не делалось. Вот на этой неделе мы проводим совещание, организационное совещание с начальниками управления образования. а они, в свою очередь, проводят с директорами школ, и те должны будут нацелить родителей на то, что им предстоит сделать. В подавляющем большинстве случаев сейчас уже, в том числе и в рамках национального проекта по цифровой образовательной среде, у нас пришло огромное количество техники на республику, и всем тем педагогам, у кого нет на дому компьютера, компьютеры будут выдаваться. Ну, если будут какие-то случаи, то это отдельные редкие случаи, где такой возможности не будет. А вообще мы не говорим о том, что это в чистом виде дистант. Это смешанное электронное обучение. И понимаем, что не в каждой семье есть компьютер до сих пор. Кто-то общается с помощью мобильного телефона. В отдельных малых населенных пунктах было такое, что приходили за домашним заданием в школу, его носили обратно и приносили тетради на проверку. То есть мы отдаем себе отчет, что это такое вот сложное смешанное обучение. Но все-таки сейчас уже в большинстве школ и скорость интернета достаточно высокая, и техники добавилось, и есть стабильно работающие платформы, такие как Российская электронная школа, Учи.ру, Яндекс. Сейчас запускаются новые платформы на уровне Иннополиса, поэтому немножечко уже полегче будет, все-таки опыт есть. И сейчас, вот только что Ирина Геннадьевна пришла с совещания, как раз проводятся встречи с той же компанией Учи.ру и ознакомление педагогов, дальнейшее обучение тому, что появилось нового на предмет для дистанционного обучения, какие изменения в этих платформах есть, то есть есть чем воспользоваться. Министерство просвещения единую платформу готовит, пока она для всей России не запущена, но есть уже такие, которые одобрены и которые массово работают. Я сейчас только подняла сведения по вакцинации последние, уже как мы в общем по дополнительное образование, среднее профессиональное, вузы, школы, детские сады приближаемся к 70%. На карантин сейчас закрыт один детский сад в Демёвском районе по ковиду и 2 детских сада по ОРВИ. В других учреждениях, закрытых на карантин, нет. Закрыты отдельные классы. Что касается 457 классов у нас закрыто по ковиду, классов-групп в том числе, это и группы СПО, среднего профобразования, и 113 закрыто по РИ. Это также в том числе и группы среднего профессионального образования. Пока выдача продуктовых наборов не планируется, так же, как и в прошлом году, только дети с ОВЗ, которые учатся в школах и получают питание, вот у них выдаются сухие пайки в случае отсутствия учебного процесса. Все остальное пока нет, не планируется.
Просто я думал, это тоже так, да. Вот это и был он самый, да. Ладно, супер. Хорошо. Идите. Все, надо срочно обедать и самое. Сколько можно сидеть вообще, просто вообще. Ладно, хоть теперь голова не болит зато, да? Сказал.
Только в приложении KFC. Используй промокод WOW30 и получи скидку минус 30% на первый заказ с собой. Подробности акции на kfc.ru.
Ну вот это и был он самый, да, я понял.
Nous allons évoquer dans cette vidéo la fin de Final Fantasy VII Remake. Au cas où le titre ne vous est pas paru assez explicite, on vous rappelle donc que l'on va beaucoup spoiler dans les prochaines minutes. Si vous n'avez pas terminé le jeu et que vous comptez le faire, alors quittez tout de suite cette vidéo. Vous voilà prévenu. Bien, maintenant que nous sommes entrés ici, nous allons donc pouvoir aborder ce sujet. Beaucoup d'entre vous ont sans doute compris la fin de Final Fantasy VII Remake, mais il est probable que ce ne soit pas le cas de tout le monde. On pense notamment à ceux qui n'ont pas fait le jeu original et qui sont forcément passés à côté de plusieurs clins d'œil et subtilités. L'idée n'est donc pas de juger ou non cette fin, mais de rassembler toutes les pièces du puzzle afin de la rendre plus claire aux yeux de tous. On va donc procéder par étapes. Et la première consiste à parler des fillers. Ces personnages qui ressemblent aux détraqueurs de la saga Harry Potter sont une des nouveautés de cet épisode. Ceux-ci semblent apparaître aléatoirement au cours de votre aventure. Ce n'est évidemment pas le cas et ils sont là pour une bonne raison que nous explique le personnage de Red 13 bien plus tard dans le jeu. Ils sont attirés par ceux qui tentent de changer le cours du destin et s'assurent qu'ils ne le feront pas. Pour vous traduire ça concrètement, ils ne font pas en sorte que le scénario du remake reste similaire à celui de l'original, mais ils s'assurent que les résultats de chaque action soient les mêmes. Car oui, il y a bien des différences dans le scénario à certains moments. Par exemple, lorsque Jesse remplace Cloud dans une mission qu'il est censé faire dans le jeu original, les fillers apparaissent, blessent Jesse et Cloud reprend donc sa place. Bien plus tard, Barrett se fait empaler par Sephiroth. Les fillers le sauvent car il n'est évidemment pas censé mourir à cet instant de l'aventure. À un autre moment, le professeur Ojo s'apprête à faire des révélations sur le passé de Cloud, que ce dernier n'est censé apprendre que bien plus tard dans le jeu original. Pour empêcher ça, les fillers apparaissent et embarquent le professeur. Il y a évidemment d'autres exemples, je ne vous en cite que quelques-uns. Ce qui est du coup intéressant, c'est ce que la présence des fillers sous-entend sur la trame de ce remake. Ce n'est pas juste le même jeu qui a été refait, puisque sans les fillers, les personnages suivraient sans doute un scénario différent. C'est donc bien un nouveau jeu, qui n'est pas censé forcément suivre les traces de l'original, même s'il partage les mêmes bases. Et ça veut surtout dire que le scénario du FF7 de base a déjà eu lieu d'une manière ou d'une autre, ce qui ferait du remake un titre se déroulant dans un genre de réalité alternative, mais qui s'imbriquerait dans l'univers global de FF7 aux côtés du jeu d'origine. Alors là, ça commence à devenir un peu technique et compliqué, mais la fin du jeu permet de clarifier une partie de tout ça, grâce au personnage de Sephiroth.
My job is to make college easier because students have a lot to come from. Sorry, Coach. Plays. Like Harper, an econ major who piles on the pressure. Grammarly can help her stress less.
This term paper's gotta be great. It's a third of my grade.
Your ideas are on the money. Let's make sure they come across clearly with Grammarly. Watch it work. Watch it work.
Wow, that is stronger.
And Avery, an engineering major who runs on ambition and coffee. Grammarly can get her her dream job.
My application needs to stand out. They only meet with the top candidates.
If you want to make a good impression and nail your delivery, use Grammarly. You don't want to pull another all-nighter, do you? Now that's taking it to the end zone. Yeah. Oh, touchdown with Grammarly. And Blake, an education major who knows what he wants. So, you're going to be a school teacher.
Yeah, but first I need to get my senior thesis over the finish line. I keep repeating the same words.
Let Grammarly help you find the right words faster. Grammarly, do your magic. And you did it in one place. Grammarly means better results. That's why it's the writing tool selected by 3,000 schools and universities. Try Grammarly for free by clicking the blue button. Class dismissed. Go on. Download Grammarly today. Blue button. Click it, Grammarly. Oh. Click it. Don't look at us. It's just a coach in the dark. It's alright. You click that blue button. Alright. I've seen it before that. Cool. Grammarly for the win.
Hello everyone and welcome to the final DLC box analysis video. It's been quite the journey, huh? The final character added to the game is none other than Sora, certainly a very requested character. While I don't have any attachment to the Kingdom Hearts series myself, he does feel like a worthy lance fighter, and I know a lot of people are very happy about it, but as always we're here to talk about hitboxes. So let's see if we can't find those famous DLC hitboxes one last time. The visuals, as always, were made by eVGENIY. Links to his Twitter in the description. In addition, if you want to support me, I do have a Patreon, where you mainly can vote on characters I should cover in upcoming hitbox videos, as well as some other perks. So should that be of interest to you, that's in the description as well. Anyways, let's get on with the show. Surprisingly enough, despite being the last DLC character, Sora actually does not have any unique DLC mechanics. Feels a bit anticlimactic to edit off with nothing after all the wildness we have looked at in the past. But in one sense, it's also kind of relaxing to not have to worry about understanding an entire character mechanic in just a few days to make this video. We can just have a look at the hitboxes and that is that. Though I guess we could take a brief look at Sora's hurtbox before we begin. Luckily for Sora, they decided to be merciful and not put hurtboxes on his cartoonishly huge shoes. This effectively does give all his moves that use his feet a bit of disjoint, which we'll be taking a look at later. Aside from that, the only thing to note is that the middle of his body sticks out a bit more than you would expect, but that's not too uncommon to be fair. Alright, starting off with what is actually a pretty unorthodox jab. Sora swings his keyblade down from over his head. The move has 3 hitboxes to start out with. On the first few frames, the 2 hitboxes farther away launch down, the closest one just stunning. After a few frames, another hitbox is added after where the blade was swung. Didn't take very long for Sora to show his DLC, huh? This hitbox also just stuns and trails after the blade. In addition, on this frame, the tipper hitbox angle is changed to drag inwards instead of down. All of this is of course just to set up into the second jab, which looks like this. It is a thrust and it has 6 hitboxes. Though since all of them are overlaid, it is effectively 3 hitboxes. If you are aerial, the hitboxes will launch you up, and should you be grounded, they will just stun you and slightly drag you inwards. Finally, the last hit is just a single hitbox that launches away. The first hit actually has a lot of active frames for a jab and is fairly quick. It reaches unusually high into the air, even to the point where you can anti-air with it. It's very good. At least the final DLC had a fun jab, though not quite as fun as Kazuya's. Sora's F tilt actually has 2 variations to it. If you just do it normally, it's a 3-hit combo. The first hit is a swing in front of Sora, and in a way it's just kind of jab, but in reverse. It even has the trailing hitbox that drags you in. The swing has a ton of active frames and covers a very nice amount of area in total, even still being active when the blade is over his head. Once again, the second hit is a thrust, and this time it's pretty clear that it's just jab 2 again, but a bit bigger. Much like jab 2, it just stuns you. The final hit is a launcher that sends you away, but I just have to note how excessive these hitboxes are. Already there are the 3 huge ones on his blade, but they also added a huge hitbox covering out in front of him. And even on top of that, they added the trailing hitbox just for good measure. I guess the lack of a character mechanic just means he has to be compensated elsewhere. The other variation is a single swing of the blade, that is performed by tapping the F-tilt. It is a bit stronger, and while the hitboxes are the same, the active frames are a bit different. And it does not reach quite as far behind Sora as the F-tilt combo, but it is barely noticeable. On the contrary, down tilt is a very simple move, only consisting of 2 hitboxes. And the only difference and it does not reach quite as far behind Sora as the F-tilt combo, but it is barely noticeable. On the contrary, down tilt is a very simple move, only consisting of 2 hitboxes, and the only difference between them is the angles they launch at, being slightly different farther out, as opposed to the one closer to Sora. The move also only has 2 active frames, which just looks a bit weird after jab and F-tilt had like 6 or something per move. The move is very good for combo starting though, so I guess that's probably the reason why they toned it down a bit. For up tilt, we have a pretty standard overhead twirly move. On the first frame, Sora has a single hitbox serving as a scoop to hit opponents in front of him, launching them above him and into the remaining hits, which consists of 5 hitboxes attempting to stun you in place, all launching towards the center, after which Sora does a swing with the blade above him, launching image-trapped opponents. The hitboxes are spaced out nicely and do cover a lot of area above him, so in addition to being that disjointed, it also makes for a great anti-air option. One kind of weird thing about this move though, is that for some reason on the second to last frame, the move shuffles all the hitbox IDs around for some reason, as you can see by the different colors. There's no real practical purpose to do this, and I have no idea why they did it. Maybe it's the unpaid intern getting one last laugh on the way out. It wouldn't be a Square Enix sword fighter without at least one sliding kick attack. This time it lives on in Sora's dash attack. The move has 3 hitboxes, all of which just launch up and away a bit. With this being Sora, as you might expect, the move has a ton of active frames. Starting out, the move is the strongest during the first few active frames, and at this point his leg is also partially intangible. After a bit, the hitboxes become a bit weaker, dealing less damage and knockback, although the intangibility is still there. During the latter part of the move, the hitboxes once again become weaker, but only by a tiny 0.4% damage, kinda making me wonder why they just didn't keep the prior damage for the final part, since 0.4% is really insignificant. During the last part, the intangibility does go away. However, a remarkable and quite unusual thing about this move is that when the move enters its weakest state, they also added an additional hurt box beneath Sora, which is likely there because of how Sora's feet don't have hurt boxes, like I mentioned earlier, in combination with the fact that he slightly enters the Z-axis during the ending of the move. It's a very uncommon measure to add to a move, but I guess they must have found it that a lot of thinner hitboxes missed him when it just shouldn't, so they put an additional hurtbox there to avoid Pikachu syndrome, I guess. Sora's grabs are fairly standard, if not a little underwhelming. His standing grab is not the best, sharing the same amount of range with Pikachu for perspective. His dash grab and pivot grab are a bit better, but again, that is to be expected. At least he does get some combo throws and even some kill throws if you can land them, so even if the grabs themselves are not the best, there are at least some rewards tied up in them. Now it's time to fly on over and take a look at his aerials, starting with neutral air. Now Sora's aerials work a little bit like Bayonetta's aerials, as in some of them have several different parts in which you can input as you please. This is present on both his forward air and his neutral air, and they do largely share the same hitboxes across the two variations, the only difference being the first hit of each combo being a unique move. So I'll just talk about both here, beginning with neutral air, where Sora does a somersault in the air. Here the Keyblade is granted 3 hitboxes, which stick to it as Sora spins around. Since the point of the move is to combo into another hit afterwards, the move has a ton of differing angles depending on where you hit the move. For the most part it seems consistent, but as with any multi-segmented attack like this, there are bound to be some inconsistencies. Forward air is a clean slash in front of Sora, being kind of reminiscent of Shulk's forward air, though obviously not quite as good, but I mean, hey, what is. It has a nice amount of active frames, and just like Nair attempts to set up into the 2 other aerial combo hits. Should you keep pressing the attack button after either of these attacks, you will go into the aerial attack combo. As far as the hitboxes go, the aerial you start with does not really matter. The hitboxes are identical across both combo starters. However, the angles and damage are a bit different for what that's worth. The second attack consists of 5 hitboxes. The blade has 3 of them launching at different angles throughout the move. Also in front of Sora there are 2 other hitboxes which are just there to make sure the move connects better, I suppose. They just launch up and naturally attempt to set up into the launcher coming after. The final hit is simply 3 hitboxes that launch away, and once again only the angles are different between the 2 variations. Both moves are really solid. The hitboxes are good, and being able to continuously hit aerials like this is no joke. Moving on to a not so complicated move, compared to everything else so far, back air is a nice change of pace, being just a simple big hitbox back air. It does hit a little bit lower than most other back airs, likely to compensate for a floaty Sora's Jumpstar, making it a bit easier to hit for him. I don't really have too much to say about it. It's quite strong and does launch at a good angle, and I mean that's pretty much what you want out of a back air most of the time anyways. So no complaints from me. Where you might see some complaints, however, is with up air, because oh my, that is an up air worthy of the series is based on, well, partially based on anyways. On the first 2 frames of the move, it has 5 hitboxes, naturally not covering the blade, but also a huge area in front of Sora as well, which is just so DLC that it's not even funny. After this, 4 of the hitboxes keep going in a standard sortie up air arc, but of course not with that, it's just the trailing safety net hitbox. Just for good measure. It's a very good move if you couldn't tell, even if it was just not for the hitbox. It's also just a pretty powerful move damage and kill power wise. I'm glad we got to see at least one last stupid DLC up air on the way out. Wouldn't want it any other way. For the final aerial, we have down air, and you can at least not fault it for not being unique. Sora spins around while he's diving towards the ground. On the way down, he is covered in 4 hitboxes that rotate along with the blade. They all have the same damage and knockback, and actually retain it for the entire duration of the move, meaning it has no sour spots to speak of. Needless to say, the amount of distance you can cover with this move is massive. It can certainly catch an off-stage opponent off guard, or more likely an on-guard off-stage opponent that simply has no other option but to eat it. The hitboxes just launch away, not much more to it. But since Sora is DLC, it also has a landing hitbox, which looks like this. It covers the ground in both directions pretty generously. though not so much into the air. But to be fair, you just came from there, and covered that area, so it might not be as necessary. Up air is aerial sweep, and consists of Sora doing many spins as he sends into the air, kinda similar to the Link's up piece. On the first frame of the move, it has 2 hitboxes that launch up. After this, however, 4 more are added that all deal the same damage and will launch with minor angle differences, with the intent of keeping you within the hits coming after it. The move then continues to use this arrangement of hitboxes, alternating behind him and in front of him, though the sizes of the hitboxes vary. At the end, there is a quite respectable launcher hit, being 5 huge hitboxes launching away. Sonic Blade is Sora's side B. Sora does up to 3 dashes in any direction. Additionally, if you hold the button down, you can home onto opponents. Ah, great, just what I needed. More obnoxious homing attacks. Can't be a coincidence that they named it Sonic Blade. Despite it being a pretty complicated move in terms of gameplay, the actual hitboxes are very simple. Just 3 hitboxes over the blade, the pretty usual arrangements. It is actually slightly offset towards Sora, and does not cover the entire blade. The hitboxes are the same for each dash, though the angles are slightly different. However, I don't imagine it mattering too much, since the move is homing and all. It's a great recovery option, and I'm sure with the homing, it can at least catch some people off guard from time to time. Down B is a counter. Who on earth could have seen that coming? The detection hitbox looks like this. Nothing too unusual. It's placed a bit more in front of Sora than most other counters, kinda like the other one-directional ones. However, unlike those counters, Sora's counter does not actually have the directional facing restriction that counters like K. Rool and Sephiroth have, meaning you can actually hit counters from behind if they overshoot Sora and hit the detection hitbox. The actual triggered attack hitbox looks like this. It's, you know, massive, but that is nothing unusual for counterattacks. You can also counter projectiles, however, the reflection is kinda weird. Instead of reflecting the projectile and sending it back, it makes it yours and just lets it keep going. So it could technically hit another opponent afterwards, though that is really not going to be too easy to apply in a 1v1 match, making the whole thing kinda pointless. But it's there if you want to. Aside from that, I don't have too much to say about it. I mean, it's another counter. It does counter things. Nice to have, but usually not something that defines a character. Sora's mutually actually has 3 different variations, that being Firaga, Thundaga, and Blizzaga. They cycle through after being used, meaning you have to use the other 2 at some point before you can use the one you just used. Firaga looks like this. On the first frame, it actually has a hitbox on the blade before the projectile is even fired. After that, the projectile is just a single hitbox traveling forwards, being pretty much what you would imagine it being. Now, as for the 2 others, at the time of this recording, we are currently missing some data, meaning we can't actually make visuals for these moves. However,
ради чего живешь-то? Жить-то ради чего тебе? Тебе, мне, всем. Что уметь-то?